Greetings and salutations, my friends. Welcome to another Tango Talks. And today, on this glorious day, we will be talking about, that's right, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. And today's subject is the September 15th stream, and unfortunately, I am a little late on this, but I had a lot of things going on with the family, and I'm still recovering from being sick. I had strep, and so I'm sure you could tell with my lovely, deep, and gravelly voice. So, my dudes, my bros, my homies, now that we're here, now that we're all snuggled up next to one another, let's jump right in. So I'm not going to talk about every single thing that was in the video. This is not a summary. This is more of a video talking about some of the things that I want to touch on that are important to me when it comes to Pantheon Rise of the Fallen in this specific dev update stream. And besides, there are several roundups already. Bazgrim dropped one, Nathan Napalm dropped one, and there are several others that I can't recall off the top of my head since I'm recording this right now. I highly recommend that you watch the stream if you want to see the full context of the video, to see all the things that are going on. If nothing else, throw it on double speed, get all the info, and boom, you're done, right? Unfortunately, I am not able to play the pre-alpha, and that's okay, because we will continue to do what we can with what we got. Alrighty, my dudes. So in this stream, there were 3 classes that were shown off and some of their spells. We have the Rogue, the Enchanter, and the Cleric. That's right, dudes. So we're going to touch on one of the spells that was talked about with the Rogue. It was called Skullcracker, which is a crushing technique, which I'm assuming means that if you have a crushing weapon, you will be able to use this technique. That's how it works for me. And one of the big things is that it will allow rogues to disorient targets and or stun them when executed from the rear. Now, the only reason I'm really talking about this is because it kind of goes into what the Enchanter does. And this is a very interesting spell. I have it up on the screen, so if you want to read the full thing, there you go. And like I said, the reason I'm bringing it up is synergies. Now, moving on to the Chanter. This right here is primarily why I'm making the video to begin with, is because I absolutely adore the Enchanter and CC classes in general, especially when they're done correctly. And a lot of games they either don't have them anymore, or they provide a secondary CC role and they're just kind of another caster that does damage. Mesmerized is the first spell that we're going to be talking about. And what's interesting about this is that they have Mesmerized as a 3-second cast, which is okay, I guess. Not what I'd want. But not only that, it has a 4-second cooldown, and it drains 1 mana every 3 seconds to maintain the Mesmerize effect, unless the target is disoriented, which is quite interesting, which is exactly why I talked about Skullcrusher earlier. This synergy is one of the cool things about the way this is going to work, and I'm going to assume that there's going to be a lot of other synergies, especially that go with the Enchanter and other classes, that will allow the Enchanter to more easily crowd control over other classes with these synergies. Now, one of the interesting things is it appears, just from the way the spell is designed, that it has a longer cast time and it has a 4-second cooldown, so that it will prevent spamming for spell interrupts. But all I have to say to that is, ew. As someone who has played it in Chanter a lot, it's one of those things where you need to be able to, especially for really bad pulls, when you pull a lot of mobs, you need to be able to like go mez, like really, really quickly. And there's not going to be any of that. So it's going to be far more strategic when it comes to crowd control as an Enchanter. Now, one could say that, why do this instead of having like diminishing returns, where so instead of spamming, if you're trying to spam a singular target, after about the 3rd spell, it will start resisting heavily, kind of thing. But I guess they did this so that it is more strategic, and they have to use other tools in your toolbox to actually help with the crowd control in any given situation. Also, the mana upkeep, I'm not against this at all. In fact, I think it adds a little bit of flavor so that you can't just, I've got just enough mana to do this thing, and then there it is. What it will probably do is it will probably mean that Mesmerize and several spells like it will probably have a low mana cost in general, and that the real mana cost may come from keeping it up over time. Now, it says 1 mana every 3 seconds. We don't know what level this is for, but considering that the actual cost of the spell is 12, I'm assuming it's pretty low. So the Force of Will cost drain may go up as you level as well, just like the mana cost would. In the video where I talked about how to fix or make charm better, or to innovate charm, and one of the things I talked about was doing this with like Mesmerized, is that you can attach a mana cost to it. You could also do the same thing with charm. They didn't talk about charm in this update, but you know, one can dream, can't we? So moving on, Discordant Divination. I gotta say, on the face of it, looking at this spell, I do not really like the fact that it is just random type of damage. It kind of makes sense for the Enchanter, sort of. You chaotic magic, sure. But the reason that it kind of bothers me is because this is going to be a game where you will run into mobs that are like fire mobs, where if you do fire damage to them, it will double their fire damage, and they will just absorb it, and it will heal them, and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So any mob that has that kind of buff where they could get empowered by a certain type of magic, you're just going to not do this, right? Because there is a 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 6, depending on how many different damage types they have, chance that you will empower that mob and wipe your group, which would be really, really, really bad. So while I think this is kind of cool that, you know, you could potentially roll the dice and get a damage type that the mob is extremely weak to, and you do really good damage based on their resistances. Or maybe they're more resistant to the type you roll. There's kind of like that kind of deal with it. And I kind of like that on one hand, but on the other, like I said, the way this strategy of this game is like, you're not going to want to use this on a mob that could get empowered by a certain type of magic. And that's just kind of bad. I'm hoping that there will be other types of damage that you'll be able to do. I don't know what the point of this spell is, considering I don't know the full spell repertoire. Like if this is like a medium damage spell that, you know, this is the real big damage dealer for the Chanter. That may be what it is, right? Because it has a 6-second cooldown, it has a relatively short range for spell casting in general, and a 3.5-second cast. So one could assume that this would be, it says dealing a moderate damage. You're not a wizard, so I would imagine this would be the damage spell that's like really good for the Enchanter. Although it could just be a middling thing, who knows? Maybe they'll have some synergy with it where it'll work with something else. Oh, if it produces, you know, fire, then your next thing that you do will be enhanced, or some crazy nonsense like that. We'll just have to see, right? Okay. And the next one is Brain Freeze. Now, Brain Freeze does appear to be a very interesting spell. 3-second cast, 10-second cooldown. Assault your target's synapses, causing their actions to periodically interrupt for up to 1 minute. So what's interesting about this is that you could potentially, in a long drawn-out fight, cast this on multiple mobs, even ones that you may even have mesmerized, so that once they get hit, they're periodically interrupted for 1 minute. Now, I don't know how this interruption works. I don't know what this interruption means. Is it a 1-second stun? Is it a half-second stun? Is it just literally it could interrupt a spell? If they go to swing, will it just stop them and they'll have to reset their swing? Who knows? Based on the way it's worded and kind of how it's supposed to work, it does feel like it could be a stun, but it's also called Brain Freeze, and so that may mean that it is a spell interrupt, and so they will have a hard time casting spells while this is on them. Who knows? I'm very interested to see how this works in the actual game. It is unfortunate that I will not be able to play the Chanter during the pre-alpha. I would absolutely love the chance to get a hold of that thing and just see how much power they actually have. It would be very, very interesting. So, moving on, my dudes. Visions of Restoration. So, a gift of vision that empowers restoration magic to a target, increasing their restoration skill by 1 for 36 minutes. I'm actually very interested in this because that means there's going to be other types of gifts that you can bestow upon your party members. So there's one that increases restoration magic. Maybe there's one that increases evocation, one that increases, augmentation. So potentially you're going to have the ability to buff damn near everything. And it allows you to give more than just melee buffs and a mana buff, right? That was the problem with the Enchanter in the old school days, is that you literally had haste and then mana regen, and that was pretty much it. And I think they give you an intelligence buff later. I think I don't remember for a fact. But one can imagine a buff for every school of magic and even potentially melee skills on top of maybe having some haste. But that might be more of a shaman thing than an enchanter thing. So, and I love the direction that this points that the Enchanter is going of a far more support CC role rather than anything else. And I really like that. And the last spell for the Enchanter, Mental Fortification. Fortify your target's mind, preventing the next spell interruption that would occur from taking damage. The amount of interruption prevented is increased by your augmentation skill. Now, I gotta admit, I was a little bit dubious about this one at first, but after thinking about it for a little bit longer, it has a 5-second cast and a 10-second cooldown. Like, especially for a boss fight, this sounds like a really, really awesome ability. So it prevents you from being interrupted by taking damage. Now, I don't believe this is an actual counter spell. So if a mob has the actual thing that will interrupt a spell while you're casting, I don't think this will prevent it because it says from taking damage. So one would assume that means from ranged melee or spell damage, right? You're in the middle of casting your spell, boom, you get racked by some fat nuke by a boss, and you just keep casting, right? Awesome. That sounds really, really cool. And the fact that you'd be able to do it to multiple people, and it looks like it lasts until it's gone. That seems like a really good thing. That you would not only be able to cast it on yourself, but others, and prepare for, really knockout, drag out fights. It would definitely, in my opinion, be really good for the Cleric, which we're about to talk about, which is another one of my favorite classes from old school EQ that I really, really like. I played a lot of that kind of thing. But anyway, I really like the direction this is going as well. I am a big fan of this type of thing. Now, it does mean that you won't be able to fling this bad boy around super quick, but it does mean that, once again, you'll be augmenting your fellow adventurers to help them be better than they are. And I could see this being a really useful skill. Boss fights, big pulls, your clerics trying to heal, your wizards trying to cast, and they're getting smacked in the face. Even potentially, your tanks, should they be spellcasters, paladins. I was going to say Shadow Knight, but that's not really what we're doing. Dire Lord is one of them. I don't know how their spells cast, but they might be castable, so it might actually work on them too, and it might be really good for them as well. One simply has to see. While I've spent the vast majority of the videos that I've made about Pantheon Rise of the Fallen extolling the virtues of the Enchanter, I must admit that possibly my second favorite class of the old school MMO variety is the healer type that is in the Cleric archetype. I played a lot of Priest in WoW, though it is not a Cleric because they do not wear heavy plate armor. That is shuffled off to the Paladin. The Cleric is a very interesting class. In EQ, they weren't nearly as awesome as I thought they should have been with the plate mail and the ability to use shields and, get into combat. They were still very squishy because of the low skill ceiling and the fact that you never, ever, ever, ever wanted to actually do damage if you were healing. So you could, in undead areas, basically be a wizard, which was okay, I guess, but it never really set well with me that they weren't actually like the frontline healer types. And I think in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, they're definitely going for that. And that is evident by some of these spells that they have. One of them is Invigorate. Invigorate your target, immediately restoring 50 endurance and causing them to regenerate 10 endurance every 3 seconds for 36 minutes. Now, this is a pretty cool ability. It's essentially a buff that will allow you to sprint more often and longer, as well as use any abilities that require your endurance. I really like it. It's got a 30-second cooldown and a 3-second cast, so it's definitely not something that you can spam around, which is actually probably a good thing, considering that it does give you that initial burst of 50 endurance. All right, moving on. Celestial Guard, which restores health and applies Celestial Guard to target for 30 seconds, absorbing damage equal to 180% of healing. If the target health is below 20%, it instead supplies Celestial Preservation to the target for 30 seconds, absorbing damage equal to 360% of the healing done. And here we go with the differentiation between the healing classes. And I really like that because it speaks to that they're really trying to make this a thing. I really like this ability. It reminds me a lot of some of the priest abilities that you got in WoW with the damage shield, with the difference being that you get probably a small direct heal, small for a main healer anyway, and then it will give you a damage absorption shield. Now, I don't know if it's going to be like WoW where people are not going to want you to shield them if they need to get hit to actually like build resources or anything, or if that matters at all. But it will be interesting to see how that works. It does have a 4-second cooldown, so you certainly can't spam it. But I imagine that unless your tank is literally taking like 4 to 5 mobs, it's probably not going to be needed to be spammed all that much, especially if you have other things that you can heal with. Next up on the block is Tome of the Initiate. An interesting little spell reminiscent of old school EQ where you manifest a tome of the Cleric order to carry with you into battle. While equipped, auto attacks will restore 1 mana. That's really cool. So I'm assuming this is going to be like an offhand thing. It has a relatively low cooldown, which is funny, but is a 10-second cast. So I would assume you probably can't give this to somebody else, but it does show that they kind of want the Cleric to be able to get into the battle, that these are supposed to be frontline healers with absorption shields, and obviously they want you to be able to auto attack, and it actually means something other than just you doing piddly damage. Now, what I'm concerned about is one of the reasons why you never did this in EQ as a Cleric is because even with full plate armor and like some of the best gear in the game, mobs would still rock you to death, especially in like a full group setting where you would never walk up and auto attack a mob while you're the main healer. It would just never be a thing, because if you got any aggro, you would immediately get pounced on by most of the mobs. And so it will be interesting to see if there will be much attacking in Pantheon and how the game and the groups will deal with the aggro that the Cleric gets. Will they get other abilities that will mitigate aggro from melee damage? Maybe they'll have an ability that will transfer their threat to somebody else. That would be a really good spell for the Cleric to be able to have, especially for this. Because, I mean, imagine you've got like a really fast mace, you've got your freaking tome, and you just walk up into combat and you're just going to town, man, throwing heals all over the place, pew, 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 and transferring all that threat to the tank, So not only would the tank be getting threat from his own generation, he would also be getting threat from your heals, which would be kind of insane. I'm not sure if they would do that or not, but hey, man, I'm just throwing things around here. We'll see how it goes. Next up is Bonds of Faith. Unite your faith with that of an ally, causing a certain abilities to restore health to that ally when used. So this is the kind of thing I was talking about with the ability to stand on the front line with your tank and actually do damage or be in the fight rather than just sitting in the back medding and standing up to heal every now and then. It's got a 5-second cooldown and it's instant cast. So next ability will show you exactly what it is. Faithful Strike. It's a general technique, so I'm assuming that you can use this with almost any weapon that you have equipped. Requires 500 readiness, 6-second cooldown, so it does not require mana to use. It's a melee ability, apparently. You imbue your weapon with the power of your faith. Before striking, dealing 80% weapon damage as divine damage to the target, and healing an ally under the effects of the Bonds of Faith for 100% of the damage dealt. And it gains bonuses from wisdom and strength. Now, I wonder if this is a melee attack that adds 80% or if it just does 80% of weapon damage. But the funny thing is that, so this would mean that if you have a really, really fat weapon, like let's say you're rolling with a 2-hander and you've got a really, and it's got a lot of damage on it and you smack that son of that you're going to be healing the guy standing next to you for quite a bit of health based on that damage. Now, it's probably not going to be much because, let's be real, in most of these games, you deal piddly damage compared to how much mobs deal. But if you're like throwing out, if you're throwing out your Celestial Guards and you have other heals and other mitigations and you're doing this on top of it, I imagine this is going to be quite good. And hopefully there's a way to mitigate aggro that doesn't require you just to stop attacking and stand there, because that would be kind of boring, right? And it doesn't require the tank to continuously just try to pull aggro off of you like a out of control rogue in EQ, where they just always get aggro and the tank can never get it back. So the devs said they want healers to have more active role in combat other than sit and cast, and perhaps because the healing will be low because of absorption, it won't generate as much hate. Maybe that's what they're going for. Maybe they'll have other abilities that will transfer hate. Maybe they'll have other abilities that will just limit hate. That's a possibility as well. Maybe classes like the Enchanter or the Shaman will get abilities that will reduce hate generated as well. That would be very interesting. Or reduce hate generated by certain abilities or spells or so on and so forth. And so that's going to be the end of all the abilities. I know I've waxed and waffled on infinitum, and I hope you guys enjoyed that little bit. They also debuted animations, and I love that they're getting it done. I love that it looks great. It does. I appreciate the fact that they're showing it off, that they're given timelines. I highly recommend that you watch the video if you're interested to see the update about how the animations are going. I can't really say much to them because it's really outside of my wheelhouse of expertise, other than the fact that I'm happy that they're coming along and they look pretty good. And I hope they continue to do great in the future. That's my hope. So thank you for spending your time here at the Tango Hotel for this amazing and glorious Tango Talks. If you want to see me create content live, I do so on Twitch every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday at noon Central Standard Time at twitch.tv/Tango Hotel. That's twitch.tv/Tango Hotel. Come say hi. I would love to see you. I normally stream things like XCOM 2. I'm doing Long War of the Chosen, so it's a really hardcore mode of XCOM 2 because, of course, I had to make it harder, right? And other things, every now and then I play Neverwinter Nights 2. I've been playing Stellar Tactics, and coming soon, very, very soon, we'll be playing Terra Invicta, a game that is made by the devs of Long War 2. So I hope to see you there, my dudes. And until next time, it has been a pleasure and honor, and I'll see you then. Peace out.